Hello, everyone out there in radio land. It is once again that particular special time of the week. What time of the week is it? Well, it's that time of the week where we come onto your radio waves and expose what's really been going on. We dig underneath the headlines. We call out the establishment on its BS. We speak truth to power. We critique the corporate mainstream media. We provide a space to talk about local politics and activism and issues going on at the national and international level. It is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. Now, as always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo or Western Michigan University, though no matter how dope or insightful they may in fact turn out to be. So we've definitely got, this is kind of a certainly a pure Michigan kind of episode that we got going on right now. A lot of our lead stories have to do with our beloved state. Just kind of giving off a little summary. There's a viral tweet shared by none other than Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez that had to do with one of our local, local insurance providers, who were only in it to help people from the bottom of their dear hearts, of course. We've got some plants shutting down, potentially, here in the state of Michigan. We've got some nonsense up at the state level. Again, some nonsense coming out of Lansing, and honestly, I think we might go ahead and start with that. Talking about. Be joined by our co-host a little bit later on. Then we'll also be having a guest on around 6, Mr. Michael Rizor, to talk about, give some updates about what's been going on with the houseless movement, the homeless people's movement here in Kalamazoo. But first, let's go ahead and start something to make you a little irritated, irate, upset about what our trifling state legislature has been up to. This is actually posted just today, and you may have heard people talking about it, but this is an example of what happens when you have corporate bought-out politicians at the state level who not only do not represent the people, but actually work as a bulwark against what the people actually want. This is a very good and clear-cut example of this. So, I'm going to give a little bit of context before we dive into the article. We were actually talking about this just a little bit last week, how the Republican-controlled legislature was trying to reel back some pro-worker state-level reforms that many activists in the state of Michigan have been pushing very hard for. It was the basically a mandatory minimum. It was a minimum wage increase tied to inflation, mandatory paid sick leave, and there's also an increased wages for tipped workers. So this originally was going to be a ballot initiative, right there alongside Prop 1, 2, 3, which all passed at varying degrees of landslide numbers. Who knew? Pro-democracy reforms are actually a pretty easy sell in a bipartisan fashion. However, our insidious little state government is doing its best to reel these things back. And, as much doo-doo as we try to appropriately and justifiably fling at corporate-bought Democrats, this is one you could really lay the blame on all the corporate Republicans in the state legislature. The vast majority, I don't think there were actually any Democrats who weren't backing this, were fully in the tank for these proposed changes as is. But what happened? Well, the Republicans kind of strategically knocked this ballot proposal out at the knees and brought it to the state legislature where they can do what thou wilt with it. So let me read a little bit from this article. We can go a little bit more in depth in how that actually played out. That's an important thing I want to kind of dive into a little bit more. This is by Emily Lawler off of M Live. Paid sick, minimum wage changes fly through Michigan State Senate. Excuse me, here we go. So, the Michigan Senate today made changes to the paid sick time and minimum wage laws over the objections of Democratic lawmakers and the groups who spearheaded the initiatives. By the way, One Fair Wage, that was the grassroots group who was really pushing this a lot. There were also a lot of other kind of grassroots nonprofits doing that. Michigan United was doing a lot of work on collecting signatures for this last year, but I digress. In September, the Republican-led legislature adopted the measures instead of letting them go to the ballot. Doing so meant, and this is really the key thing here, doing so meant that they could come back and amend them with a simple majority instead of the 2/3 vote it would have taken to make changes passed at the ballot box. So when I talk about doing this strategically, this is why they did not want this to go to the ballot, so that they would have an easier time changing it without having needing to have a 2/3 mandate. They actually tried something very similar with Proposal 1, but they were not able to get the numbers around to do so, to get it in the legislature. So what did they do? Well, I'm gonna spoiler alert, nothing good. Here's what happened to what was initially like a very strong pro-worker legislation. The Senate made big changes to both measures in a quick-moving process on Wednesday, approving major changes in an 8:15 a.m. Senate Government Operations Committee and passing the bills on the floor before 1 p.m. So kind of similar to what we've seen at the federal level, where this legislation is drafted very, very quickly and then just pushed through as fast as possible. The full chamber approved the changes Wednesday over the objections of Democrats like Senator Curtis Heartle out of East Lansing, who went on to say, "I will not support a blatant violation of our democracy, a violation of our Constitution." He said the lawmakers were essentially ripping democracy away from the people, in contradiction to the constitutional provisions allowing citizens to seek legislative initiatives. No Republicans spoke in favor of the bill's passage on the Senate floor. So here's let's lay out what this is actually going to do to this bill. The new minimum wage law from the initiative isn't in effect until March of next year. As written, the law slowly brings minimum wage for tipped workers like waiters and bartenders up to the same level as regular minimum wage and raises minimum wage to $12 per hour by 2022. But under the bill approved by the Senate Government Operations Committee, and actually, we're going to pause real quick. I'm going to go let one of my co-hosts into the studio, and we will be right back. Actually, I lied. He's not here yet. Sorry. Faked all y'all out. But let's go ahead and keep talking about the article. So here's the really pernicious thing. So would have raised minimum wage to $12 per hour by 2022. Which, again, I need to remind everybody, if minimum wage over the last several decades had actually tracked with inflation, it would be around $22 an hour right now. That old canard about how productivity has gone up, but wages have remained stagnant. That is certainly not by accident. It is certainly by design. And they do their best to inhibit even these very kind of moderate, mild reforms or updates to the minimum wage. And now my co-host actually is here, so give me just a sec. Hey everybody, we're back. Joined by dear co-host Lawrence.
Yo, what up?
So Lawrence, before you got here, I was just talking about how the Michigan State Legislature of the Michigan State Senate is kind of rolled up their newspaper and is bonking the noses of all of us peasants out there, kind of de-fanging the teeth out of the mandatory Sick Leave Act, let me tell you exactly, go back and just kind of lay it out. So originally, it's going to be right away, get us $12 an hour by 2022, which again, should be at 15, at least $22 an hour if we track with inflation. But still, pretty mild reform. I'm not going to knock it. It's like, okay, that's good. I would certainly love $12 an hour versus the $10.50 I currently make.
Right.
Of course, now that bill has been changed under the Senate Government Operations Committee. It's again controlled by the Republicans. We're going to do it a little more slowly. So instead, it'll be $12 per hour by 2030. And here's the key thing. As originally written, and this is really more important than even like what number you start at, the minimum wage, per this proposal, was going to track and be indexed to inflation. Of course, the Republicans stripped that out of there because, again, we're talking about that's 12 years from now. Right. $12 an hour is not going to be the same as $12 an hour right now.
Right.
It's like let's go back to 2004? $12 could buy you a lot more even then than it can right now. That's just the nature of it.
Let's keep it real, Doug. It's if you look at the average price of a one-bedroom apartment, even if you were being paid $12 an hour, you would have to save up 2 months of paychecks, 2 to 3 months of paychecks just to pay that rent. Not to mention if you wanted to pay for food, gas, or toilet paper, so you could actually have a decent living. So it's not like a. So you're right. We should be moving towards a living wage that's tied to inflation. And a majority of the country, the overwhelming majority of the country agrees with it. The problem is that you have representatives that are supposed to represent us who it's in their financial interest to not do what's the will of the people. I should not say that. You can struggle on a wage that's lower than $12 an hour, but to live with some sort of dignity, if you was to ask the people who are our representatives to have their daily, have their paychecks be cut to $12 an hour, they would lose their minds. They would absolutely lose their minds.
Oh yeah.
But they don't want to live like the people who they're supposed to be representing.
No. And also want to get like some nuts and bolts. Here's what they did to the sick leave part of the act. It was originally it was supposed to be you get 1 hour of paid sick leave for every 30 hours worked. Capping out about 72 hours per year for larger businesses and 40 for smaller ones. New proposal, it's 1 hour of paid sick leave for every 40 hours worked. And they limited it to 36 hours per year of paid sick leave, which isn't even a full work week if you're working full time. Like this,
it's amazing. We talk about this gig economy. Everybody's working multiple jobs just to make ends meet. You gotta work 2 to 3 different jobs just to survive comfortably. And it's amazing to see. Though it's something that a friend of mine said over the weekend, over Thanksgiving weekend, you cannot see the perspectives of other people if you are blinded by your own privilege. And that's what this is. That's exactly what this is. We have homeless veterans in our state. We have more empty houses and units in Michigan than actual homeless people in Michigan.
Well, that's for sure. Yeah.
FBI study just showed 45% of people who are homeless are working full-time jobs. They cannot afford to buy somewhere or pay rent somewhere. So they're either sleeping in a shelter or they're sleeping in a car. Most of those people don't even have cars. They have to use public transportation.
Oh yeah.
So
And yet, you'll hear the same people complain about it's like, oh, you just got to up by your bootstraps and stuff. It's like, if you're going to lock wages in for the next, 12 years at a level that, $12 an hour is still, not really enough, especially if you have, a family and you're trying to just kind of live out on your own. It should be any surprise. It's like, of course, you are kneecapping people so that they don't have the resources to actually become self-sufficient, let alone to have an actual living wage and good quality of life.
It's amazing to see. It's amazing for me to see that these same people who will tell you to pull yourself up by your bootstraps live in states that take that benefit from federal programs that they want to cut. They want people to be self-sufficient, but they don't want to give people the means to be self-sufficient. So this is another story that we're probably going to end up talking about, but we have people who the number one cause of medical bankruptcy in America is medical expenses. So you have people who need to pay for their medical expenses, pay for gas, pay for transportation, and you're asking them to do that with a wage that you wouldn't even take yourself. But you're going to legislate that for everybody else in America, like we don't have some of the richest companies in the world in Michigan. Mm-hmm. It's not like Stryker and Pfizer, the DeVos family, and these other
Spectrum Healthcare, which we're going to be talking about later too. Yeah,
are these multi-billion-dollar companies who are not paying their taxes. It's not like that these companies cannot pay a living wage. It's not like Amazon can't pay a living wage. And shout out to Bernie Sanders, because next week he's going to have a town hall that everybody should listen to on Monday.
Is that the one where he's going to go after Walmart?
Oh yeah. He is. Okay. Again, Bernie Sanders and Ro Khanna. They are the reservoir dogs right now. they are the reservoir dogs of Congress right now. And I shouldn't say that. No, I would say that because they're bringing in Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and others to just roll into Congress like, yo, what's good? Yeah. We about this life. It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, not to get so.
But no. Sorry. But
I do want to talk about New Deal Grandpa later on. But
okay, no. But the point that I'm getting at is that we have such wealth inequality in this country that the richest 3 people in the world have more wealth than half the country. That is not a joke. That is not a punchline.
That is true.
That is real fact. So the fact that we have legislators that do not understand the struggle of their own people that they're supposed to be legislating means that when you go out to vote in primaries and in elections, make sure you're voting for people who have your best interests in mind.
Please. It'll be very interesting to see how our local, or I guess statewide races play out in the coming years. Now that we've knocked gerrymandering out and we've got, the automatic voter registration. We've done a lot of groundwork to at least make our representation in Lansing more representative.
Oh yeah. We're gonna have to babysit Gretchen. We're gonna have to babysit Gretchen.
Hey Gretchen, didn't she campaign on $15 an hour minimum wage?
She campaigned on a living wage.
Yeah.
She campaigned on reinvigorating jobs.
Is she gonna say anything to the Michigan Senate about that? We got to work with them. That's the thing. Abdul and his crazy supporters
I need to
reach across the aisle.
I'm gonna need for Gretchen. Gretchen, since it was sexist of people to point out your ties to Blue Cross Blue Shield, and then you hired the CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield to be in your transition team, how about you ask them to stop raising premiums on people so they can actually live a decent life? How about you actually be about that life that you said you were campaigning on? You said you wanted to do infrastructure. Infrastructure is a great thing. That's fantastic. I want my cities to not have poison water. Please put in policies that will help the average American make more money. That's about it, man. And tell your local senators like Debbie Stabenow and others to stop being on that BS. Call them up and tell them, no, we need to raise the minimum wage here. Because people are barely surviving. That
is so true, and one of the hard things I'd say, even when you get kind of a better districted maps, something a lot of the state Republicans use. I think it was about 6 months ago we reported on that story where they were basically, the Michigan legislature was passing this thing that would protect kind of poor rural areas from the Medicaid from the work requirements that they were imposing on places like Detroit, Kalamazoo, Benton Harbor for access to food stamp benefits and stuff. So one of the hardest parts of it is done. We've at least made the chessboard a little bit more fair. But there's still that culture war, man. That culture war garbage that they throw out there, because there's still I got those conservative relatives who you'd think a higher minimum wage. We're working class people. We should all be for that. But then they'll post some meme about the McDonald's worker wants the same wage as an EMT, blah blah blah. I'll just say, as somebody who's gonna be trained up to be an EMT, they should both make at least $15 an hour.
An EMT should be paid more than $15 an hour, and a McDonald's worker should be paying a living wage. Yeah. If you are working 40 hours a day, you should not be struggling to live. Mm-hmm. Regardless of what your job is, even if you're sweeping the sidewalk, if you're flipping burgers, if you're writing code, if you're working 40 hours a week, you should not. If you're working 40 hours a week, not 40 hours a day, hyperbole. Yeah. But if you're working 40 hours a week, you should not be struggling just to survive. Oh yeah. I'll give you a quick example. My asthma medication, one of the asthma medications I take, costs $325 every 3 months. Yeah. Every 3 months. I've been working at a factory. I make around $11.50, $12 an hour. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So for me and my paycheck, I have to budget money out of my paycheck to make sure I have my asthma medication, or I will die. The problem is one of my same medicines costs $100 every month. So that also means that's money I have to take out of the little chunk of change I got for my asthma medication, that if I drove to Canada to go get them would be $35.
Yeah.
So like you know what I'm saying? Like I actually talked to my dad about this. I was like, if we filled up the car, went to Canada, got my medicine there, and then drove back, it would probably be cheaper than me buying it in America every other month.
That's true.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I was like, we actually had a real conversation about this. I was like, if I lived in Port Huron or Detroit, oh yeah, I would do that all the time.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's crazy to think about, like, you know, because you know, as somebody, I've done my fair bit of traveling, you know, squirreling money away. And I remember I was talking to some friend of mine who's like, he's like a socialist over in Europe or something. And I was explaining, it's like, yeah, you know, like, I messed up my hearing about like 4 months ago, but because I don't have any health insurance, I had to wait until my next enrollment period at work.
Man.
So like, it's been like 3 months. I got this right ear that just does not. It rings. It does not hear as well as it used to. And I'm like, I probably should have seen a doctor right away, but I did not want to go into substantial medical debt. And he's just like, that is insane. I cannot believe your American healthcare system is that messed up.
It's that brutal. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like in other countries, you sick, you go in, they take care, they analyze it, take care of it, you go home. You know what I'm saying? In France, if you don't have transportation, they will pay for you to have transportation. Like, if you have not seen the movie Where to Invade Next by Michael Moore, please go do so. You're missing out on some very good footage, on some very good information. Same thing with his last movie, 11/9.
Yeah, Fahrenheit 11/9.
Yeah,
I haven't watched it yet myself, but I did hear a lot of good things from it, particularly that you know, he focuses on a lot of things that don't really get enough mainstream attention about, like, kind of what caused Trump to become president. So
no, he talks about Trump for like 20 minutes, and then he gets to the nitty gritty about how the Midwest and a lot of how Michigan felt. And he talks about Rick Snyder, and he does something in the film. I'm not going to spoil it, but it was spoiled in the trailers. But he gives Rick Snyder Flint, Michigan water. That's the best way I can describe it. It's absolutely amazing.
All right, well, let's go to a little break, and I don't know if we want. There's a couple other stories about local Michigan politics that are similarly infuriating. So maybe we can hop on those.
Doug, I definitely want to talk about There's a couple stories that I want to talk about. One that's tied to a Michigan story. Michigan, the House is trying to repeal concealed carry.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so we'll be right back with that. We're going to take a quick little break, play a PSA, and then we'll be right back. Y'all listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo.
Are you the police?
No, ma'am. We're DJs.
89.1 FM, Wider Syndicate.
They're not gonna catch us. We're on a mission from God.
It may not be apparent, but hunger is a rather prominent issue amongst the student body of Western. The Invisible Need Project is a multifaceted initiative that's aimed to help struggling students. Every 2 weeks, generous people donate their food to the pantry located in the Fawn Student Service buildings or other drop-off locations. All you need to do is grab a reusable bag and grab whatever food you need to help sustain yourself. If anyone's unsure when their next meal will be, or if you have a little extra food you'd be willing to donate, the food pantry is your place. If you're looking to help donate, become a volunteer, or just learn more, call 269-387-4742 or email dosa-inp@wmich.edu for details.
So we are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo.
How was your Thanksgiving, by the way?
Oh, it was pretty good. Yeah, like we all, like my family. I'm really fortunate. I just get together with my immediate family. I don't have a lot. I don't have like a MAGA hat wearing cousin I got to deal with or anything. I was actually giving a little bit of advice at the last show. It's like here's how to deal with your conservative family if you have to talk to them. But yeah, no, it went pretty well, and I ate a little too much, as it were.
I had a shameless plug. I had a workshop on the other side of the state. For those who do not know, I'm an international street dancer, and I had a teacher workshop on the other side of the state that weekend. Thanksgiving and the weekend in the days before, I was in Texas with my family. It was pretty dope.
Yeah, just a b-boy standing in my b-boy stance.
Yeah, my gun in my pants. I'm fresh. Well, we can't have our gun in our pants anymore because if the House passes the concealed pistol license.
Yeah, so like while we're on the topic of the trifling ass state legislature, this is something you were talking about. I'm gonna read a little bit from the article and then we can like go into it a little deeper. But the Michigan House passes bill to end concealed pistol licenses. That's by Chris Ehrman. Michigan House passed a package of 4 bills that would make concealed pistol licenses optional for people living in the state. There's actually a little bit of an older article from last year in June, but it ties into some other stuff we're going to talk about too. So basically, they would remove the restriction of requiring a license to carry a concealed pistol and let people voluntarily get education or training since a permit would not be required. Michigan's concealed carry permit also is referred to as the quote-unquote coat tax by some, because a person would need one on them if a coat or jacket falls over their weapon. Tom Lambert, president of Michigan Open Carry, supports the legislation and said the coat tax can turn a law-abiding citizen into a felon. What they mean by that is it's like, oh, I'm walking along, I've got my pistol at my side, whoops, my long shirt or coat went over it, I don't have my concealed carry permit, I guess I'm going to jail. Very interesting hypothetical scenario they pose there. Excuse me. Opponents say not requiring concealed pistol licenses and the training required to get them could pose dangers to police and the public. Democratic State Representative Jewel Jones from Inkster said it is the primary responsibility of the government to make sure citizens are safe. Should another mother have to bury her child because of a tragedy that occurred because of irresponsible and untrained handling of a firearm, Jones said before a vote Wednesday on the House floor. So, bill ended up going to the Senate. And it did end up passing. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I mean, here's the thing. We talk about the Second Amendment a lot, and over the past years, I've definitely gotten harsher on my stance when it comes to the Second Amendment, just because of the outrageous number of tragedies that we see. Like there's a discussion that we have, for people who do not know, there's a discussion that we had a while ago about mass shootings and covering a few in particular, and we did not cover them because of the number of people that were shot. And I remember talking about this and I'm like, look at the conversation that we're having. We're not having a conversation that there was a mass shooting. Mm-hmm. We're having a conversation, should we cover the latest mass shooting because there may not be enough bodies that have dropped.
Oh my God, yeah.
Like that was the thing that really made me have to look at my stance on guns. Like, look, yes, I want people to be trained. I want people to be law-abiding citizens. But here's the problem. If you're a black person in America, that concealed carry gun is going to be the excuse that police use to kill you. If you pull out that gun and try to be a good guy with a gun, you're going to get shot by the police.
Yeah, we were just talking about that last week. It's literally right. the exact kind of person who should have a gun in that situation, according to like kind of the right-wing narrative. But skin tone was a little too dark, and ended up getting shot just about immediately when the police arrived. This was the security guard we were talking about last week.
No, that was you had the security guard. You had the security guard in Chicago. You had the Marine in Alabama. That just recently happened. Black Friday. There's a shooting that happens at the mall. A 12-year-old and a 17-year-old get shot. You have a Marine that is there trying to protect other civilians. The cops shoot the Marine and because they thought that he was the person that was shooting up the mall. Later finds out, no, he was protecting people, and the person that was shooting at the mall is still at large.
Yeah.
Like... And if it's not stories like that, you have the story in Wisconsin of the dash cam footage of the body cam footage that just came out of a shooting last year, where the police said that a guy, the man who they critically injured, had a gun or was reaching for a gun, had a gun on them. He didn't. Was reaching for a gun behind the air conditioning unit because he was on the roof. He didn't. And they shot him immediately because he dropped his arms by his side. He dropped his arms by his side. He wasn't. He has arms up the entire time, waiting for them to come to him. His arms got tired. He dropped them, and they opened fire on him. And then, while he's on the ground trying to cover the bullet wound that they just put in him, they tell him not to move, and then they handcuff him while he's bleeding, not trying to stop the wounds, not trying to help him because they just shot him and he's partly paralyzed now. They're literally shooting him because they thought he had a weapon.
Yeah, and I think like it's really hard to like, especially if situation, you out there, you're white, you're talking to your kind of your white ass relatives out there, whether they're from rural areas in the suburbs, or they just do not hang out with people who do not look like them a whole lot. And it is hard to really explain that, especially if they come from like kind of a pro-gun stance like this. And you can even see some of this from like the pro-gun left as well. Where talk about like, well, having this, being able to just like carry it around, it's my right. It'll make things like safer. Here's the deal. Now, if you're white, you'll be able to carry this thing around. Yeah, you're not going to have any problems. Worst case scenario, because it's mostly white men who do these mass shootings, it's going to be easier for them to go and do something like that. But whatever, in potential or intangible benefit, white people think they get from walking around with a concealed weapon, for people in non-white communities, especially those that are poor and besieged by the police on a regular basis, it becomes a liability. It puts a crosshair on your forehead,
Right. Like, that's the thing. Like, look, again, let me repeat this again because I know it's probably going to get misconstrued from certain people. I'm for black gun ownership. I'm for gun ownership. But for those who call themselves strict constitutionalists, let's remind everybody what the Second Amendment says. A well-regulated militia who's first of all, well-regulated militia. Are you part of a well-regulated militia? No, you shouldn't have a gun. By the text of the Second Amendment.
And we should
That's for the freedom and protection of the state. Their right to bear arms shall not be infringed. So, are you part of a well-regulated militia whose job is to protect the freedom of the state that you're in? No, you're not. You don't classify in any of these two things. Then maybe you shouldn't have a weapon.
I mean, I even say like, to a certain extent, what you gotta look at is the whole discussion about like gun ownership. I think you need to decouple from the Second Amendment because think of like what was one of the primary functions of a well-regulated militia around the time of the drafting of the Constitution. It wasn't to protect against foreign invaders or something like that. It was primarily to basically do criminal justice functions. At the time, it was kind of code for killing native folk and chasing down runaway slaves.
Yeah, they were slave patrols. The government gave militias, organized slave patrols, the right to keep and store weaponry. I'm not and this is my thing. I don't have a problem with people who have weaponry. That's not my issue. My issue is we have to, if we're going to talk about things like demilitarizing the police, taking away civil asset forfeiture laws, having civil
forfeiture?
No. Taking away civil asset forfeiture law, stopping broken windows policing, having a citizen review boards, having more police accountability when they do fire and kill people, demilitarizing them and not giving them militaristic weaponry. Okay, that's fine, that's dandy, and I'm all for those things because those things will positively affect the American people. But within that same token, we have to demilitarize the civilians in our country. 1 out of 8 people in America owns guns. 1 out of 8. And the FBI study that came out in 2016, 2017 showed that between 3 and 12% of the times when mass shootings happen, they are stopped by a good guy with a gun. 88 to 97% of the times, 3 things happen. Either the mass shooter shoots the person who has who's the good guy with a gun. The person who's being the good guy with a gun shoots innocent civilians, or the cops shoot the good guy with the gun because they can't tell the mass shooter from the good guy.
That's true.
We saw it in L.A. with the cop that ran into the bar at to stop the mass shooter. He was a good guy with a gun. We saw it in Chicago with the security guard, who was an armed security guard, got shot by the police even though he had security on his chest. We just saw it with the Marine in Alabama. You saw it with the mass shooting that happened at the high school, the recent one, Parkland. They had armed security guards there. The armed security guards not only did not stop the mass shooting, they was about to shoot innocent kids again. And that also goes and ties into a story that I know that me and you wanted to talk about, Oakland University.
Yeah, and I did want to just the Oakland story. That was the one about
Let me read
okay.
it. For defense against this is from NPR. For defense against active shooters, Michigan schools hand out hockey pucks.
Oh yeah. Let's keep on coming with our state.
That is not a joke. That is not a punchline.
Yeah.
That is real facts.
Oh yeah. Oh man. And I think this just goes to show, and I want to dive deeper into that one too. But speaking of somebody who, because I've spoken kind of from the standpoint of the working class should have a right to armed self-defense, and talking about even groups I support groups like Socialist Rifle Association.
Right.
There needs to be a nuanced discussion about how to actually deal with this issue, that is what I'd hate to see is kind of the leftist gun culture grows. I don't want us to be in that right-wing frame where we're just we just need guns everywhere and it'll be perfectly fine, because you study your theory and you know enough about American society, you understand there's nuances to this, including racism, as we just talked about. The influence of so much of it is kind of tied into patriarchy and toxic masculinity of this violence. I think the left does a better job at and I mean not the liberal left, but the actual left does a good job at kind of trying to zero in on these actual root causes. But we shouldn't be deaf to the idea is maybe certain areas should have gun-free zones. And
let me just hop in. This is a quote from the police chief in Oakland at Oakland University, the Oakland University police chief. If you throw a hockey puck at a gunman, it would probably cause some injury. It would be a distraction, if nothing else. says the police chief at Oakland University.
This sounds like they made Kevin McAllister the new gun safety czar or something. It's like, and then you tie up some paint cans and you do that over the door and it'll just bonk them in the head. No,
right. We are at Home Alone levels of hypocrisy. No, but that statement ties into a story that we talked about months ago, where they were teaching. A solution that came out of Parkland was they wanted to start teaching teenagers and middle school kids how to close a wound if their friend got shot. So we're not dealing with the problems, we're dealing with the symptoms. We're dealing with the aftermath. Yeah. We're not dealing with the fact that smoking causes cancer. We're dealing with the cancer messing up your lungs and your liver and your kidneys.
Man, I'm so glad you said it, because like that. I mean, that ties up like so many of the stories that we're covering today. Because like, you know, not like the healthcare thing we're gonna cover is, again, like, you know, it's an insurance company that instead of like providing equitable healthcare is telling their customer or whatever to like, oh, start a GoFundMe, or even like I was just thinking like, you know, how like, you know, treating the symptoms, like you know, like that headline I read the other day about how like so geoengineering is starting to appear in like a lot of mainstream outlets, and I think I said it was a CNN article or something about how they want to it's the whole kind of seeding the skies to like darken them to block out the sun, and it's just like, that's the insanity of our culture. That's late stage capitalism right there. It's like, we would, instead of going for the root causes, let's just fight the sun. Let's just do that.
Like, let's blot out the sun because
like some Mr. Burns stuff.
Right. Let's blot out the sun because global warming is hurting us, but we still want to take all the oil and minerals out of the ground. Yeah. Like, it is the most backward way of healing, of fixing the solution. You know what? Instead of taking the bullet out of your arm, how about I use a magnet to and I can teach the kids how lead can be attracted to magnets. Like, are you like, it's the level. We're laughing.
You gotta laugh to keep from crying.
To keep from crying. That's what it is. Oh my God.
We got a few minutes left before the next break, but do you want to talk a little bit, because we mentioned the Spectrum Health thing, and I think maybe that whole discussion about Trump and GM is like a whole discussion unto itself. God. But
I want to. Okay, so there was one last thing that I want to talk about, but this is The other thing I wanted to talk about was a CNN contributor and pundit ripping CNN because they're letting racists and lies on their airways, and she's talking about she's talking about the problem of neutrality
bias.
Yeah, and it's amazing because Cenk Uygur had that hour-long that half an hour speech and that half-an-hour Q&A to the National Press Club, and they were bewildered by him saying, no, you're sucking at your job because you're choosing neutrality over objectivity. And for those who do not understand the difference between neutrality and objectivity, let me explain.
This is an important one, folks. Get your notepads out.
Yeah, let me explain. Objectivity is looking at facts and addressing issues based off of said facts. Neutrality is listening to both sides of a story and giving them both weight when one side's telling a lie and another side's telling the truth. Let me give you an example. The Lions play the Bears. The Lions say they won. The Bears say they won. We don't know. What are we? A news organization?
We gotta be neutral. Yeah.
It's not like that we can't look at the score or anything. Like, no. Objectivity is saying, nah, bro, the Lions lost. Like, you know what I'm saying? Lions got outscored. You know what I'm saying?
Fake news.
Right.
No, that's just, Lions are the best team ever.
You're right. This is the issue that I'm having, that why we have this show. This is the reason why I do my podcast, my live stream every Friday on my Facebook Live. It's because when you don't have someone being objective about facts, you lead to things like CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, and the other mainstream media sources within the last 6 months only saying climate change 4 times. Like, that's not hyperbole. when the California fires happened, and with the mass and the massive coverage that it was taking, the mainstream media only mentioned climate change like 4 different times. They didn't talk. They didn't mention how California's using inmates to fight fires, and that 1/3 of their GDP comes from inmates. They didn't want to address that. They addressed Kanye buying private firefighters to make sure that their house didn't burn down. That's what they wanted to cover, but they did not cover the reason why the wildfires are worse.
Yeah, I will say, from a Marxist perspective, that does teach you some lessons about late-stage capitalism. The rich will have their own private firefighters.
No. We have. It's not like we don't have history of this.
Yeah.
We've had private firefighters and private police officers in America. You want to know what happened? Houses got burnt down because they were extorting people. They was like, hey, did you pay? Hey, if you pay for it, we'll do it. Oh, you don't have any money because all your stuff is getting burnt down. Hey, sucks for you.
Yeah. So we got all this high pressure water over here, but you say, how much you got? Yeah.
Right, you know what I'm saying? Like we act like we don't have precedent for this. Like, you know what I'm saying? But okay, there's a bunch of other stuff that we can talk about, but I know we gotta get to this break because it's almost 6.
I say we got like 5 minutes. I think I did want to touch just a little bit about the Spectrum Health thing. Because
jump on it.
A lot of people, because it went viral, a lot of people don't know that is a local Michigan-based healthcare provider that is involved in that. And you know here's what's so egregious about it.
You want me to jump on it, or you got it? Oh no, you got it. Go ahead.
Yeah. So this went viral. It was shared by AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Yeah. So some well-educated bartender, you might know her. And Spectrum Health sent this Grand Rapids woman a letter. So, she this woman needed a heart transplant. Now, in any other modern country on Earth, you just have to make some phone calls, file some paperwork. So on November 21st, she posted a public letter to her Facebook page from Spectrum Heart Health and Lung Specialized Care Clinics that recommended a fundraising effort of $10,000. Now, here's the thing, so it's become almost kind of like this morbid joke on social media that people, GoFundMe is like the top health care provider in the United States.
It's 1 out of 3 GoFundMes are for medical expenses, which makes them the 3rd largest insurer in America.
I think okay, so here's the big difference.
That's not a joke. That's not a punchline. That's real facts.
Here's what makes this seriously not funny is there's a big difference between everybody, people being like, our healthcare system sucks. We're poor working class people. Here's a GoFundMe so I can get a kidney or a heart transplant or something. Versus a multi-billion-dollar insurance company telling you, you know what, we certainly have the money to do this, but we're not going to. So why don't you use that fundraising service all of the other peasants use to not die, drop dead? And this thing is dead serious. No pun intended. There's people who they've done these healthcare related GoFundMes, and we've covered stories where people don't get the insulin they need, and they end up dying. They literally die. It's
this is the problem. This is the problem with right wing logic when you hear people say, universal health care. This is a new talking point that Republicans actually have. Oh boy. Healthcare. The new talking point that Paul Ryan literally said this. Well, healthcare for all is really healthcare for none. That is not a joke. That is not a punchline. That went through a Republican committee that they said, healthcare for all will be healthcare for none. All is in the title. You what? What am I missing? The other issue.
War is peace.
Right. That is almost as dumb as Donald Trump saying water, it's wet from the standpoint of water. It's almost on that level. It's right below. This is the other issue. This shows why, one, Bernie Sanders and people and other progressives, when they run on progressive platforms like universal health care, why they are the most popular politicians in the country. Why? Because over 70% of the country wants Medicare for all. Over 88% of Democrats and over 54% of Republicans want Medicare for all. And for an insurance company whose sole job is to make sure, one, that they make a profit, but two, make sure that people don't die so they can pay for the insurance, their best excuse, because in the letter it says, hey, start a GoFundMe, because if you can't pay for the medicine after the heart transplant, we're not going to do the heart transplant. But if she does not get, forgetting the fact that if she does not get the heart transplant, she will die. So when I'm, and this is to the conservative people who listen to us, and I just need everyone to think about this. If this was your child, this was your brother, your mother, needed a heart transplant, or you ran out, or you lost your insurance because you lost your job, what do you do next? Because you can't take somebody to the emergency room to get a heart transplant. No, you're taking them to the emergency room to die. If that person gets cancer and they can't afford the medicine, what happens next? They're going to die. There's no other ending to that solution. And to tell the best thing that you can give advice to your customer is to do a GoFundMe. You can go have fun. You can go sit on a cactus. You know what I'm saying? You can go suck a bag of donkey balls.
Sit on a cactus, and you know, we'll start a GoFundMe. You know, maybe use that money to go rake the forest in California. Prevent forest fires. So we're gonna go to a little break. We come back. We're actually going to be joined with a guest. We're going to give a little update on what's going on with the activism on the part of homeless folks in our community. There's a new article about it. Of course, you know, we always like to dig a little bit deeper on the show here. So this is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
Hello, this is Stephen Merritt from the Magnetic Fields, and you're listening to WIDR 89.1 FM, Kalamazoo.
Stay tuned for Wider's weekly RSO Spotlight on WIDR Kalamazoo.
Young Black Male Support Network is an RSO on Western Michigan's campus that provides a support network for African American males and males of color on Western Michigan's campus. My name is Davion, otherwise known as Davey, and I'm the event planner for YBMSN. We meet in the MLK room on the second floor of the Bernhardt Center from 8 to 9:30 on Tuesday. To find out more about YBMSN, you can find us on Instagram at YBMSN.
This has been our weekly RSO Spotlight on WIDR Kalamazoo. For more information on how to spotlight your RSO, head to WIDRFM.org.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. So we've got a guest on the program. He's one of the very vocal activist. He was with the Bronson Park Freedom Encampment since the beginning. And it's Michael Rizor, like Razor with an I. Is that, yep? Am I pronouncing that right?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So wanted to bring you on, so there was a new article out about some state funding that just came through. And, I think it's important, like, a lot of people have been asking me about, like, the current state of the protest, or not the protest encampment, but, like, the state of the organizers, like, kind of what's been going on. And I definitely do want to get into the weeds of this question. I'm going to read from the article real quick, and then I'm just kind of ask you about, like, your thoughts on it. So, what happened? So the Michigan State Housing Development Authority allocated about almost $457,000 to support Housing First programs in Kalamazoo County through its Emergency Solutions Grant. An additional $50,000 in funding for rental subsidies was approved as the state agency learned of a month-long encampment protest in the city of Kalamazoo. MSHDA is also providing 100 additional housing choice vouchers, raising the total offered this year to 1,047. Vouchers allow people to pay rent based on their income, while the state pays the rest of the rent. Generally, tenants pay 30% of their gross monthly income toward rent and utilities. So, the way MLive kind of covered this was as kind of like a victory for the movement going on around here. Of course, being in touch with people who actually been involved in it, I kind of want to get your sense, like, how much of it is a victory? What within it do you have to, like, kind of critique or criticize? And, like, what does this mean for, the homeless folks here in town?
It's a small victory. I mean, that's how we're looking at it. It's a small victory because it was thanks to the protests that the County of Kalamazoo is getting this extra money needed for the housing vouchers, the extra housing vouchers, the extra subsidies they need to cover rent. But it's not enough. I mean, we have landlords and tenants and whatnot here in the County of Kalamazoo, and the thing is no matter how many vouchers we have, there's not enough places that accept the vouchers in Kalamazoo County. So there's people that have to go to other counties, there's people who have to go to other cities just to be able to use these vouchers, so they have to pack up and move away from their families to use the voucher because there's not enough landlords that are willing to accept these vouchers. I actually wanted to ask you about that too, because you brought up a really good point in this article. This is something that a lot of us have encountered personally, is I think people kind of underestimate the degree to which there is definitely, like, some housing discrimination that goes on here, and not only, like, on racial lines, but particularly along class lines. I was wondering if you could talk about that, like somebody who maybe doesn't understand quite, like, the difficulties of going from homeless to actually getting a place to live, based on kind of the landlord and housing culture here in the city. So the one major issue that there is with the housing vouchers is you are required to stay at the mission. In order to even get proof that you're homeless, you have to stay at the mission in order to prove that you're homeless. So you can't just go to the drop-in, which is the Ministry with Community, which is the daytime homeless shelter, and get them to say, hey, this guy's homeless, so you can even apply for the voucher. Really? So the only way that you can do this is by staying at the mission, which we all know the mission, which we've been, the BPF, the Bronson Park Freedom Encampment, since day one has been droning this on, is that the city and the county believe that the mission is the go-to solution to solve the homeless problem in Kalamazoo County. The problem is that the Kalamazoo Gospel Mission does not solve the problem of homelessness. It actually furthers the stigmatization and furthers the problem of homelessness. See, now I did not know that. That is some crazy stuff, because there's a couple things that come up. Was one, as a religious organization, I think, like, there's some legal issues about them being viewed as, like, the homeless. I'll get to you in just a second, Lawrence. And then also, just, like, I know we've talked a little bit on the show about the conditions of the gospel mission. Well, first I'll go ahead and go to Lawrence. See, you guys.
Well, I mean, this goes back to something that we were talking about earlier in the show. We're talking about the symptoms after the. We're talking about the symptoms, not the problem. Mm-hmm. So, affordable housing is a problem in Kalamazoo. Rent has gone up significantly. Mm-hmm. The lack of well-meaning jobs in Kalamazoo. Red line districting. People not being able to get loans or being able to they have to hit rock bottom before some of these services will actually help them. You know what I'm saying? So it goes back to the problem that we're talking about, that we are dealing with the bullet wound of homelessness. We're not dealing with the gun or the bullets or the reason why it should be fired in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Oh. Mm-hmm. And the reason for homelessness is generational poverty. It's you grow up in poverty, you struggle when you get out of your parents' house, and you struggle to get on your own feet because your parents can't help you, and that's the major issue with homelessness. Is like Lawrence said, is what the county's trying to do, what the city's trying to do, what the mission is trying to do, is they're trying to address the symptoms, but not the problem.
But not the cause.
Not the cause.
Yeah.
Exactly. They're trying to address the symptoms, not the cause.
But the causes are bigger than just Kalamazoo. Wages have been stagnant since the 1980s. We go over this all the time. Mm-hmm. Half the country makes less than $30,000 a year. A majority of that is single parent households and people of color, and a lot of also poor white folks. Let's not get it twisted. So the fact that those are the major issues. And those are not the things that are being substantially addressed. Those are things that are not being significantly addressed. Yeah. And I don't knock the gospel mission for trying, but the gospel mission is not the end all be all, and they're not not even getting enough funding to expand, so they could even provide even services for people who are in much more desperate need.
I have a question that I wanted to ask you, Michael. So this kind of goes back to, I think there's still a lot of confusion. People who haven't been, tracking this super closely since the city, went all fascist on the camp. But question for people home. So are there still regular meetings going on with the city and the homeless organizers? And if so, has there been any movement to talk about these kind of systemic problems? I know a lot of it is short term, especially now that we're in the winter. But because you can maybe illuminate for the folks listening kind of what the state of things are as far as that goes.
There has been work group meetings that have been trying to address the issues of trying to address the homelessness problem. These have been put on by the United Way, not necessarily the city. And the city individuals that have been to these meetings either just sit there playing on their phones. I've actually witnessed a sitting city commissioner sitting there playing a video game while we're discussing homelessness and how to fix homelessness and what the problem is with homelessness. And the other issue when it comes to affordable housing here in Kalamazoo City is the fact that the Kalamazoo City uses county-wide income levels to determine what affordable housing is.
Yeah.
So, you're looking at a city of Kalamazoo which has very low income compared to Portage, compared to some of these other towns, and they're saying affordable rent is $800 a month. That's
gosh, that is so on point, because you look at all these things that are being built up in downtown, and it's a joke. It's a bad joke. There's it's affordable housing, and our joke on the program is yeah, it's affordable. There are people out there who can afford it, and we're gonna rent to them.
There's a developer who's going to be putting up a housing project on housing apartments and on the north side, and he has done something that I think was smart. He has, instead of just taking county levels, instead of just taking city levels, he went even further to determine affordable rent in the north side neighborhood. He using income levels of the north side residents determining what affordable rent is in the north side. Not basing it on the whole city, not basing it on the county. He's basing it directly on the north side, which is the reason why rent is looking at possibly for affordability is about $300 $313 from what I was reading on.
Well,
I'm trying to find the article in our group chat. That's why I was just trying.
Which article? The one
we're talking about right now.
Oh yeah. It'll be right on. Excuse me. I think it's the last article I ended up posting in there.
Okay.
Yep. All right. So. Oh yeah. Well, one that is good. That's actually some good to hear. Although I did want to go back and talk a little bit. So, we talked a little bit on the show about the gospel mission, and one of the things I'm curious about is like, y'all did a really great job like bringing this issue to the fore. This is something that like I have heard, people justifiably complain about the gospel mission time and time again. And it wasn't until the Bronson Park Freedom Encampment really happened that like average people, even a lot of like so-called like liberals in town, really started paying attention to it. So what I'm curious about is, now versus before the protests started happening, have there been any changes like made at the gospel mission? How have they responded to it? And maybe describe a little bit about like, explain to maybe people at home who haven't heard yet, like how are they still like falling short and just being completely like inadequate resource for homeless folks here?
I mean, they said that it was a victory by the BPFE that they turned the campus into a smoking availability on campus. I'm like, really? Since day one, we've been hammering you guys about more prevalent issues that are going on at the gospel mission. Your staff treating people that are gay, lesbian, part of the LGBTQ community with disrespect. Those who do not believe in God, treating them with disrespect. Kicking people out for health problems and kicking people out who come in drunk during the winter. And it hasn't changed. They're still kicking people out on the streets if they come in drunk. They're still kicking people out on the streets if they're coming high. And they're still barring people from the mission. And it's just going to get worse because they've now moved the women over to the men's side on the second floor. The mission keeps saying there's going to be enough room. But the problem is if you're shutting down a third of your shelter that you're going to have to end up revamping and remodeling, and you're shoving them into the second floor, how are you going to still be able to serve the community effectively? And there is still people living in tents. There's still people living outside. Not because they choose not to follow rules. It's not that they don't choose to want to follow rules. It's the fact that these rules are so controlling. It's that we cannot function effectively in society. We can't look for a job if we're mandated to work at least 20 to 40 hours a week for free for the mission. Mm-hmm. And they call it volunteering. I'm sorry to say, it's not volunteering when you're forced to do it. That's slavery. Bottom line, that is slavery. And the other issue is the mission has not done anything that we have asked them to do. They keep, every time we go to the mission and we ask them what's going on, they tell us, well, this and this and that. They've told us that people's bars have been lifted, but then again, one of our supporters on a weekly basis has to make phone calls to the men's side letting them know that this has happened because people are still being turned away from the mission for one reason or another. And so this $50,000 that's brought up in this MLive article, yay, it's a victory because it's a little extra money to help with the housing problem here in Kalamazoo, but it's not enough. The point of the BPFE wasn't necessarily to gain more money for the county to squander and do whatever they want to do with it. The point of the BPFE was to bring awareness to the homeless problem here in Kalamazoo County, to bring awareness to it, because the problem is that's exactly what the problem is. There's a homeless problem here in Kalamazoo County, and they're using numbers that don't make sense. They tell you there's enough beds for the homeless population here in Kalamazoo County. There's not. They are counting every bed that's available. But if you go through and you look at what's available for emergency shelter, there's only like 500 beds available in Kalamazoo County for emergency shelter purposes. But there's over 4,000 people who are homeless in Kalamazoo County. There is a need for a non-religious, non-secular building for the homeless to go to. The Ministry with Community. I have witnessed this over and over again in the last couple of months since it started getting cold. You say one thing wrong to a staff member, instead of being barred for the day, you're barred to a meeting, and then you're barred for 3 to 6 months during the cold months. So therefore, if you can't go to the mission during the day, which you still really can't do unless you want to sit in the cafeteria all day and don't do anything, you are stuck outside. If the library is closed for inclement weather, you're stuck outside all day long. You're stuck trying to look for work without having anything to do. Something else I learned the other day from a staff member at the Ministry with Community is that they're barring people from the Ministry with Community who stink, who smell. So the issue I have with that is...
Like the whole point is you need a place to do proper hygiene, right? And it's...
Exactly. And the thing is so if that person gets barred for 6 months for not taking a shower or for stinking at the Ministry with Community, if they get barred for 6 months and they're barred from the mission, where's that individual supposed to go for proper hygiene?
I mean, we seen what happens like that. Those people end up going to jail, or they end up going to they end up getting in trouble so they can go to jail, because that's the only other place that they can go to get properly hygiened and also to stay out of the code. I mean, it's a part of that. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy of we want people to be able to pick themselves up and be self-sufficient, but we're not giving them the tools to be self-sufficient. So
speaking of the jail situation, according to the sheriff of Kalamazoo County, about a third of the population currently in the jail is homeless, self-identifies as being homeless. Okay. The problem is the reason why somebody who is homeless is more likely to commit a crime is because they have been turned away left and right by the services here in Kalamazoo County, so they rather commit a crime so they get 3 hots and a cot. That's exactly what they want. That's exactly why that is the problem. It's like everybody says, oh, homeless people are more likely to commit a crime. Yeah, they're more likely to commit a crime if these services keep turning them away. They're going to find any which way they can to get 3 hots and a cot and a way to take a shower. They're going to find a way.
It's about understanding human dignity and survival. If I'm trying to survive and I'm hungry, then the last thing I'm gonna think about is if I'm going to break a law or something when I'm trying to find food and I'm trying to stay warm. I mean, it's not like we don't live in a place where getting 12 inches of snow is just a walk in the park. So I mean, it's a part. It's a failing on understanding the problem of what we keep going back to. Like, if someone's being disrespectful, someone's being drunk, someone's being irate, and you feel like they're going to be a harm to other people there that's at the mission, I can see why you be like, yo, you can't be here for a while, chill out. But if at the same time, if people are getting, we also have to understand that since the people that are trying to serve you are also still flawed human beings, and you're dealing with other flawed human beings who are in a worse state, you have to understand that communication between the two is that even though you're going to butt heads, you still got to work with people. Now, if people are high and drunk and they are a danger to other people, I agree with them not being there, because you're gonna hurt somebody. But at the same time, we also have to understand that we have to keep those people who are in those dire straits somewhere, and we have to make sure that we have to keep people accountable, because it's our tax dollars that are housing them in the prisons. It's our tax dollars that's feeding them in those prisons. We are being put in a much more dire state because we're not helping them to be self-sufficient so they can contribute. And that's a part of the problem.
Yeah, and the other issues that I find is with people getting barred from these places that are homeless. If you get barred from the Ministry of Community for one reason or another, okay? If you get barred from all services at the mission for one reason or another, let's say you have both those bars on your record. Mm-hmm. So, one, you have nowhere to take a shower. You have nowhere to eat, because the church is only served Wednesdays and Sundays. So you have nowhere to eat any other day during the week. So by the mission, people talk about panhandling, okay? So, they say it's a problem in the homeless community. But there's also statistics to show that majority of the people who panhandle aren't homeless. They actually have a home to go home to. But the issue is, you're saying you want to combat panhandling. You want to combat homelessness. The problem is if an individual is barred from the mission from all services, which means they don't have a place to sleep at night, they don't have a place to take a shower at night, they don't have a place to eat. 2, so then if somebody's then barred from the mission with community, they can't take a shower during the day. They can't eat during the day. So all that's been cut off from them. So then they can't get a job because they smell. They can't wash their clothes because they smell. They can't wash their clothes, so they can't go to a job interview. They can't be prepared to go look for work. So then these individuals are left to find ways to make money. And that's either A, stealing, which is breaking the law, panhandling, which is now breaking the law. So we need to, and this is the reason why the Bronson Park Freedom Encampment was created, was to bring awareness to the issues plaguing homelessness here in Kalamazoo County and hold our elected officials accountable. And that's what we do on a daily basis. That's what we try to do on a daily basis, is we try to keep our elected officials accountable. Yes, is it sad that the $500,000 that was allocated by the Kalamazoo County went away? Yes, it's sad. But that is not the fault of the county. That is the fault of one individual on the commission, Kevin Waterman, I think that's what his name is, I can't remember, Waterman, who did something illegal by still being a county commissioner with living on a district. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So because he brought that to the forefront, because he's the one who brought that amendment to the budget, it has to be brought back up for a vote. I have it from reliable sources within the county commission and from other people that I talk to that right now the reason why they are afraid to bring it forward is they do not have the votes, because there's a dead split currently in the county commission. You have 5 Democrats, you have 5 Republicans. I've been in the county commission's meeting since Waterman's left, and I can tell you this, everything is political.
Yeah,
everything gets split.
It certainly is.
So, yeah. And that's the thing is, so that's what the BPFE was for. And this article that we've been talking about, yes, it's great that Kalamazoo County got $50,000, extra $50,000 because of the encampment. It's great that they got this extra funding. It's great that they got this grant. But obviously, MLive just released an article today that obviously the state does not feel that Kalamazoo County can use those funds properly, because they have appointed a nonprofit organization to handle the funds that they have now given to Kalamazoo County to help people get homes. But the other problem is there's not enough places that accept housing vouchers. There's not enough places. And city officials, county officials want to say that there's enough places for these vouchers. The bottom line is there's not. I know of at least 2 people that are within our encampment that are struggling to find a place, but they have a voucher. The wait list is long. We have another individual who was top of the list to get a place, and then she was bumped down to number 6 on the list. So there's priorities that happen. So people with kids, they get priority. So single males like me and other people that are homeless, the opportunity for them to get a voucher, the opportunity for them to get an apartment is very slim because of the fact there is discrimination across the board, both race, sex, gender, marital status, you name it. There's discrimination across the board when it comes to housing in Kalamazoo. There's not enough affordable housing. There's other barriers to affordable housing in Kalamazoo. The fact that they run an extensive criminal background check way back 10 years, and if you have anything on your record within the last 10 years, you're automatically kicked off the list because they're not going to rent to you.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Right.
Or they check your credit score. You have a very low credit score, they won't rent to you. Even if you don't have rental history or anything on your credit report that shows that you're not going to pay rent or anything like that, you can't get an apartment. That's the problem, is that this money, it helps the problem. It helps add vouchers. It helps all of this stuff. But the bottom line is it's not enough. It's not enough. That's the reason why the Bronson Park Freedom Encampment is still working hard to fix the issues of homelessness, fix the issues of affordable housing here in Kalamazoo. because that's what needs to be fixed. You can throw money at the problem all you want, but that's just the Donald Trump way of doing it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's just a Republican way of doing it, is that in order to fix a problem, we must throw money at it.
Well, I mean, no, I have no problem throwing money. The thing that I have an issue is who is and where is the money going?
Exactly.
That's it. Look. Let's not be tripping. I'm not
who's
as
using the money. Yeah.
I'm not as far left as some of the people in this room is. But I'm not full socialist. I'm democratic socialist. You know what I'm saying? But at the same time. Yeah, we
shouldn't seize the land bank.
No. No, I'm for public. No, here's the thing. I'm for public. I would be for nationalizing the banks, but that's a totally different conversation.
No, I'm just imagining this image of like we all just show up at Mary Balcom's house with like the USSR theme playing.
No. I'm for nationalizing the banks. Like that's actually a real conversation, but. It's about where the money is going and where the money is going, what programs are being given to, and are those programs effective or not. Utah, for example, cut their homeless population by like 70-something%, like 80-something%.
By establishing a housing first policy. And according to MISTA, every city and every county is supposed to have a housing first policy.
But again, like their program could also be looked at as universal housing, something that Martin Luther King talked about. If we can build new dorms on Western's campus, and if we could build new dorms on Western's campus, even the old dorms on Western's campus, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. We could build stuff like that in Kalamazoo for the homeless. Now, yes, it's going to take maintenance, it's going to take staffing, but that's a better solution than us trying to build an entertainment center downtown. You know what I'm saying? Remember they were trying to propose that.
Yeah.
Like it would have been
an event center.
In an event center. We could use again the initiative that you said about the brother that's doing affordable housing on the north side. I live on the north side, so I've seen property values and the housing and people get pushed out of the north side. But at the same time, why is that happening? On the north side, there's it's redlined. If you live north of North Street or you live north of what's that street?
Was it? Are you thinking of like Ransom? Or,
like if you live north if you live east of Douglas and north of North Street, you're pretty much SOL. And in many situations when it comes to housing or getting a lot of programs that would help with some of these things. But a lot of those areas are working class poor. There are people who have professional jobs. Some of them don't though. So places like Alamo or Fox Ridge and places like Interfaith Homes, like those places need to also not just need to be expanded, but there need to be more services put into those places so that people who are living there has a sense of dignity. Mm-hmm. Like just because you're living in a shelter or in a I forgot what it's called when you live a subsidized housing. Yeah. Just because you live in subsidized housing or you live in a shelter does not mean that you don't have a sense of dignity. And since in America specifically we have more empty houses than we actually have homeless people, this is something that we can actually do as legislation that would cut back on taxpayers' pockets. That's the moral thing to do. If the people are using that Christian narrative, it's the moral thing to do because Jesus talked about housing people who are homeless, and Jesus was a homeless Jew. It's the financial thing to do to house these people and to put money into services so they can be much more beneficial to society. And it's just the logical thing to do because we don't want them in prisons and being 1/3 of the population in prisons.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Michael. I had a question for you, but please respond to that.
So going back to something I said earlier, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to say that. I wasn't trying to, because I got a message from somebody talking about this. I'm not trying to say that homeless are more likely to commit a crime.
Oh yeah, they're not.
I'm not. No, I'm not trying to say that.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of statistics that show that they're typically less likely, and
they're more likely to be a victim of crime than they are to commit a crime.
Absolutely.
They're more adept at being a victim of crime than they are of committing a crime. And something else, just so you guys know, is the BPFE's main thing that we're focusing on right now is emergency shelter for those living in the cold. There's people still there's still people living in tents right now. I'm one of them. There's several other people that are still living in tents. And the thing is there needs to be emergency shelter for the winter, because with the way the mission is now shut down the women's side and moved them over there, once it really gets cold and once it really hits wintertime, there's not going to be anywhere for anybody to go. It's going to be max capacity, and they're not going to be able to have anybody in there. Two, we need housing first policies. Lisk was asked about this as one of the work group meetings, and Lisk has this weird idea that they know what housing first is, but they really don't, because I had to school them on it. Their theory is that you have to have a building set up for an individual that has the service providers directly in the building. That's not the case. The case for a housing first policy is you put them into a home and you help them by bringing services to them. They're living on their own. They don't need some babysitter to watch over them. The point of a housing first policy is to fight homelessness, because you can cut homelessness population down like Utah did by a housing first policy.
That's right.
And there's these misconceptions out there that the BPFE has asked for nothing but handouts. The thing of the matter is that's not what the BPFE was for, and that's not what the BPFE has done. The thing is the BPFE has done is we have demanded the city to take reasonable action to investigate they changed to all services, but to mainly investigate the Kalamazoo Gospel Mission for malpractices and whatever they've been doing behind closed doors that they don't want anybody knowing about. That's the main thing that the BPFE has been about. And those are the main things that we've been driving home on. And we're going to keep drilling them on this. We need to keep drilling them on this because of the fact the mission is failing Kalamazoo County and is failing the homeless community. Their program that supposedly combats drug addiction, I know at least several people that were in that program that are back on drugs. Because their whole thing is throw God at the problem and God will solve the problem. But the problem is God's not the reason why somebody's homeless. The reason why people are homeless is because the lack of resources, the lack of everything, the generational poverty here in Kalamazoo County. That is the problem with homelessness.
And, not to mention, too, rents are going up all over the city. And, just as kind of an aside, the BPFE and the attention on this comes at a very interesting and I say an inconvenient time for the billionaire class of the city, because what you're starting to see, especially in the last couple of years since the Foundation for Excellence went through, is there's been mad gentrification, particularly parts of the north side and the Vine neighborhood that are on the edges of downtown.
Exactly. And even our own city commissioner, Jack Urban, doesn't even know, had to be schooled by a citizen on what gentrification is, because he couldn't even realize that gentrification is happening here in Kalamazoo.
Well, here's the thing about gentrification. It helps the realtors that help pay the politicians that are in our community. I mean, let's keep it real. Realtors are the biggest donors on state and local levels to politicians. So, I mean, they're not really going to understand it or fake to not understand it because they're paid not to. I'm not saying that some of our politicians are corrupt shills. All I'm saying is that if you have a financial interest into keeping the problem the same, or if you are misunderstanding the issue because you're not living it, so you're blinded by your own privilege, then you need to sit back and listen. But the other part of it is understanding that months ago, we had they were changing pipes on the west side for water, right? Water, they were changing pipes on water. But I don't know if they ever got to the north side or the south side. I don't know if they got to the Vine neighborhoods. I don't know if they got to the east side. But it's also understanding that the condemned buildings and some of the other projects that are some of the other vacant buildings are on the north side. Those places could be used as, could be built or used as shelters or stuff. But who's putting in the money to make sure that those programs happen? Because if I remember correctly, the $500,000 that we had to go to the homeless problem is no longer being used. Or am I miscorrect?
We were talking about so that is that reference to the county money?
It was the county. So at their budget meeting back in October. Kevin Waterman brought up an amendment to the budget to allocate $500,000 to combat homelessness and affordable housing here in Kalamazoo County. But at the time that he did that, he was illegal.
Yeah.
He was not meant to be on the commission because he was living outside a district. And so the money disappeared because of illegality issues, legal issues.
Yeah.
And the thing is so the whole problem with the homeless thing here in Kalamazoo is right now we got people living out.
I'm trying to find that article, bro. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I can't find it.
We got people living out in tents, getting sick, living in these elements not because they don't choose to go to the mission. It's the fact that the mission is not a safe environment for people to be in. So they rather sleep in a tent, sleep out in the elements, than go to a place that is not safe for them.
I mean, at the same time, we have to look at, that also goes back to funding. How much of that funding from that half a $500,000 that we were supposed to have, that we were supposed to get, going to expanding or giving more services to places like the mission?
One of the initial demands, and this was always going to be a long-term struggle, but one of the initial demands was getting some kind of a building, some kind of facility for people to go that was an alternative to the gospel mission during the winter. That has fallen through, and that is sad and disappointing. But
it's because the city and the county says there's no buildings available that they can come up with for this purpose, even though we offered to do the work to get the building up to code for the winter.
Yeah.
They're refusing to say there's any buildings available in Kalamazoo. I guarantee you that we can find several vacant buildings that are just that.
We're gonna have to put in the work to make sure that a building is up to code. I definitely agree with that. It's just that we also need to make sure that who's staffing it, who's also going to help people transition into trying to find jobs, things like
we're talking about building up the infrastructure. That is important, but I think at the same time, what I've seen is a couple of the main impediments here have been bureaucracy. It's this idea that we kind of own it or we kind of don't own it, or maybe there's some holding company who owns it, and there's a kind of a refusal to do it. And then I think there's correct me if I'm wrong, I think discrimination plays a big role in this too, because there are properties like this that would be absolutely perfect for this reason, this purpose in the city limits of Kalamazoo, but there are people who own these properties who do not want to give it over for that purpose.
Exactly, and that's the reason why there's a need for more emergency shelters in Kalamazoo County, because the mission cannot be the go-to sole place for the homeless here in Kalamazoo County. Every year we have people who die on the streets because they're stuck out in the cold. They're stuck out in the elements, and for one reason or another, they can't go to the mission. For one reason or another. Whether they choose to or because of something that may not even be a problem. And emergency shelter is a need. Shelters are a need in Kalamazoo County. I was once told by a person of mine that the reason why Democrats and Republicans on both sides of the aisle don't want to talk about this issue is because it would cost them voters.
Yeah.
That's the exact reason why nobody wants to talk about homelessness. Why it's a touchy subject. Because nobody wants to combat homelessness because it keeps people where they want them. The thing is that homelessness is a problem that's becoming worse and worse in our country as we are seeing encampments left and right popping up in cities and states all across our country because there's a lack of shelters. There's a lack of resources for individuals to fight the things that are going on in their lives that have led to them being homeless. That is the problem that needs to be addressed, is we need to stop putting a Band-Aid on the problem and actually roll up our sleeves and get into the dirt and actually fight the issues that are plaguing homelessness, gentrification, generational poverty. Those are the things that need to happen.
Let me jump in real quick. It's also fighting for poverty, fighting for policies like you said, housing first, but rent and mortgage control. We saw things like those propositions being proposed in California.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Like you've seen not just in California but in other major cities gentrification and happening, where people who are poor and disenfranchised are being kicked out of homes that they've been living in
due to
their entire life.
It's sad.
But again, so, and it's not like those policies are not popular policies, because you have poor white folks, poor Latino folks, you have poor folks all over the country that need a place to live. So if you're going to frame it so the way that you argue for it, and this is the problem is with our representatives, is that they don't know how to, certain representatives do not know how to frame things from your opponent's perspective to make sure that they are truly being honest about their perspective. This is the reason why I love Bernie Sanders and why we talk about him. You know, the whole Stop Bezos Act or the Stop Walmart Act. You know, if we want to stop homeless, then and you talk about you want to make America great again, let's have the Make America Housing Great Again Act. You talk about rent and mortgage control. You talk about having a housing first program that's similar to Utah's. You talk about having putting more money into staffing and jobs programs for those people who are homeless, because again, FBI studies show that 44% of Americans who are homeless have full-time jobs. So what about that other 60, that other 56%? So putting those things into policy and framing it from the perspective of it's a moral choice if you care about your Christian values, because Jesus talked about it. Even though Jesus was a homeless Jew, that housing those that are homeless, feeding those that are sick, clothing those that have no clothes, all those things.
I'll say.
Wait. So you frame it from that perspective. It's an economic. It's better for our economic development, and we're giving people the bootstraps that they need to be self-sufficient. That's how you frame the argument.
Yeah, but I know a lot of our listeners are like left-leaning and stuff, but go through some of those comments and some of these articles. There's a lot of people in this community need to read their Bibles. I'll just say that. Like to you, Michael.
So the thing, like the problem, the problem with homelessness is generational poverty. Generational poverty. The issue with homelessness isn't that it's a lack of work ethic on the homeless people. It's not that. Homeless people generally want a better life. They generally want to work to get a better life. They don't want a handout. I know some people who have gotten a voucher and have actually broken down and cried because they feel that they have failed themselves somehow, because they had to resort to that level. They had to. They've broken down and cried because they had to resort to the lowest of levels, and that is to get a voucher in order to be able to have a home over their head. Kalamazoo County, Kalamazoo City does not have a housing first policy. There needs to be a housing first policy in effect to effectively combat homelessness like they did in Utah. And then the other issue is is he brought up the whole thing is being able to get to reasonable food sources. I'm sorry to say, when we hear stories across this country, in Florida, granted a federal judge slammed it down, cities getting charged, groups who are feeding the homeless getting charged $10,000 fines, or what happened in, I believe it was Kansas, where the food inspectors actually came out and poured bleach on the food because they were feeding the homeless. Yeah. This is, you know, so the way that the homeless is being treated is a problem. There's a need for emergency shelter here in Kalamazoo. There's people who are getting sick because they're living in tents in the cold. There's people that need a reasonable place to go. We need housing first. We need to change. We need to roll up our sleeves, get into the nitty-gritty of this, and actually do the work to combat homelessness. Throwing an extra $50,000 at the problem doesn't solve it. Throwing extra vouchers into the mess doesn't solve it. Yes, are they great things? Yes. But the point of the matter is there is policies in place that bar certain individuals from accessing these funds, accessing these vouchers. There's a first step that we need to attack in order to get people back on their feet, get people out of the streets, and people out of these elements. Because I guarantee you go downtown, you pull a homeless person off the side and you ask them, do you like the situation you're in? Not a single homeless person is going to sit there and tell you, oh, being homeless is a great thing. They're not. They'd rather be in a place where they can shut the door and lock the door at night and feel secure. There is genuine individuals in our community that want to see an end to homelessness. And it can happen. But we all know what happened to Martin Luther King Jr. when he tried to start a poor people's movement. He was assassinated.
Yep.
He was assassinated after he spoke out against the war in Vietnam, trying to get poor people they check. Yeah. And he was just harassed aggressively, and it wasn't just him. It was the Black Panthers.
It was exactly. And that's the thing is, it's like, so what we need to do is we need to not only hold our city officials accountable, not only our county officials accountable. We need to hold our state officials accountable, our governors accountable, our president accountable, the United States Congress accountable to actually implement policies that actually effectively combat homelessness, to get people off the streets, get people out of the elements during the winter. The time is now. The time is now.
So actually, my time is up. It's actually got to go.
Oh, all right. Well, thanks, Lawrence. Yeah. So I think we just got about 10 minutes left. I want to close out with two more questions. I did want to say, just really from the bottom of my heart, I think all of the poor working class people in this town, homeless or not, they owe all y'all a tremendous debt of gratitude, because it's brought not only the issues of what's going on with our homeless population, but bringing these issues of gentrification and what the priorities of our city actually are. It's brought them about in such a visceral way. And it's not something that the city is able to just kind of put back in a box anymore.
No, so you can't. That's what they've tried to do. That's what the government has tried to do for years. Mm-hmm. They've tried to silence every movement that has ever spoken out to try to combat homelessness. They've tried left and right. The problem is the time is now for individuals to be elected to city governments, county governments, state governments, the United States Congress, and to the presidency that are willing to ignore those people who are telling them that this is not a problem that needs to be addressed. Homelessness needs to be addressed. The time is now. The time is now to address it, to get people out of the streets, to get people back on their feet, to get people into a warm place for the winter, to get human beings, not a piece of trash on the side of the road, back to a place where they feel safe and secure to be able to live their lives accordingly. Mm-hmm. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is the right of all people in the United States. Not just an individual who has a silver spoon in their mouth, not an individual with money, Sorry if I'm yelling.
Oh, that's all right. Yeah.
So the point of the matter is the time is now to hold our elected officials accountable to combat homelessness, to implement policies that combat homelessness, not cause homelessness. Yes. Because policies all across the board that have been implemented by cities, by counties, by states have caused the problem of homelessness, not just generational poverty, but policies that have been enacted left and right over the years caused homelessness, and it's ballooning out of control to the point that you go on the news, there's encampments popping up in Akron, there's encampments in Seattle, there's encampments in California, there's encampments all across this country because individuals are having trouble finding the resources they need to get off the streets, get back to a place where they need to be. The point of the matter is we need to start, not just in Kalamazoo County, but everywhere across the state of Michigan. We need to hold our elected officials accountable. Not just here, not just in Michigan, not just in the states that are near us, but all across this country. There needs to be a movement to end homelessness. That's the reason why the BPFE was created, was to help try to combat homelessness here. But we know, our members know that it starts here, but it has to go somewhere else, because just combating it here doesn't solve the problem. It has to be solved all across the board. Policies need to be changed. City ordinances need to be changed, because in the city of Kalamazoo, you can't sleep anywhere.
That's right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's kind of like what kickstarted the whole thing, is like the city trying to clamp down, really at the behest of, rich entitled people who's like, oh, I shouldn't have to look at the homeless people. I'm downtown. So I guess I really want to just round out by so bringing it back to just two really kind of core questions. Everybody listening at home, I think, everyone's like, what can we do? What can we do to help out? And obviously there's like, what can we do up in the short term? Because as you said, the city has failed. There is not an alternative winter shelter at this moment. What can we do to help out our brothers and sisters in the community during this winter when we don't want them out in the cold braving the elements? And I don't know if is this something that is the Bronson Park Freedom Encampment is your working group? Are you collecting any kind of donations? Is there any
currently right now there is people in the homeless community that are in need of hats, gloves, blankets, socks, and individuals that are living in tents are in need of ways to be able to keep warm if they're going to sustain this winter inside tents, ways to weatherize their tents. You can like our Bronson Park Freedom Encampment page on Facebook and you can send a message to our group. We'll get it if there's anything you want to donate, and we'll get it to the people that need it the most. Mm-hmm. Because that's the problem, is when things go to these organizations like the Mission or the Ministries community, it's not necessarily getting to the people who need it, who need it right then and there. They don't need a social work appointment. They don't need a housing. They don't need a clothing voucher to get it. They need it right then and there to be able to save themselves. Because if we do not combat homelessness, if we don't combat the issues right now, there's going to be dead homeless people being found by the police all through our community this winter. There's going to be people that will lose their feet, lose their legs, lose limbs, lose fingers to the elements due to frostbite. There are people that are going to die of hypothermia. We are human beings, not a piece of trash on the side of the road. Whatever you can do to help would be greatly appreciated. Whatever you can do. There is a wide range of things you can do. Donate food. Find ways to figure out something to help the homeless. And if you want, just go to our Bronson Park Freedom, like I said, and you can send a message. And whatever you donate goes directly. Whatever you donate to the Bronson Park Freedom Encampment goes directly to those in need. Does not go to some other organization. It goes directly to those people on the streets right now battling the elements who need these supplies. It does not go to an organization where they have to go through red tape in order to get it.
And bureaucracy, which really has been a big part of the problem as we've uncovered.
Just in one last thing, just so everybody knows at home, is that homeless people are human beings. They are just like you and me. They are human beings who are currently down on their luck, who just need a shoulder to cry on, just a helping hand to get them back up onto their feet.
And I guess the last question I'll close out. And again, thank you so much for giving the folks at home that information. Again, that's Bronson Park Freedom Encampment on Facebook. You send them a direct message, and thanks for being that kind of like portal for mutual aid. So the other question is so how could people also kind of help in the long term? And this might sound like kind of a weird issue to bring up, but something that always races through my mind thinking about this issue is if we don't fix this now, if we don't really start working on this problem now, it does not bode well for Kalamazoo in the future. Not only because there's gentrification, but I look out 60, 70 years, looking at climate change. It's very likely Michigan, and particularly Kalamazoo, is probably going to be getting a lot of climate refugees. So
the thing is that they can do now is they need to call their elected officials. Call the governor-elect. Call the current governor. I don't care who you call. Call your elected officials and hold them accountable to a housing first policy. Email them. Send them letters. Flood their mailboxes. Flood their voicemails. We need housing first policies to combat homelessness. That is what we need now. If that's what you want to do now. And if you need to drop off donations somewhere, 509 Davis Street here in Kalamazoo, you can drop off donations there. Just message the BPFE page through their thing, and we'll make sure that the stuff gets to the people that need it. But what you can do now is contact your elected officials, hold them accountable to try to fight homelessness, try to combat homelessness. Because we are all human beings in this world, and we just need help getting back on our feet. We don't want a handout. We just need help getting back on our feet.
All right, Michael. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I hope that y'all out there listening learned a lot. Again, the city might have pulled some light dystopian fascism a couple months ago. Took the camp down, but the people organizing it are still at the forefront. And as we say all the time on the show, we got to fix this problem. We got because you can make all the excuses you want. It's like, oh, it's a national problem. It's this, it's that. It's whose responsibility is it? Well, we can either do something about it, or we can sit on our hands, and we really shouldn't. Anyway, I want to thank y'all for tuning in today. This has been the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR. You can always catch our episodes on YouTube and also at our Facebook page. Thank y'all for tuning in, and keep on fighting for that revolution solution.